Are you tired of all this blue yet? Blue, blue, blue as far as the eye can see? This Pokemon game has been brought to you by the Happy Happy Cult. But yeah, we're gonna take a break from the sea today and explore an abandoned ship. And at the end of the last video, when I pondered whether there was something between light and darkness, many of you wrote in to say that there was something, and it was called Twilight. So I think I have finally found the basis for the third version of Black and White. It's going to be a battle, a thrilling battle between Team Edward, led by the playable characters Mother and Ruby, Sapphire and Emerald, and Team Jacob for, well, I honestly don't know what evil deeds Team Edward and Team Jacob could do. Well, I suppose from a certain point of view, reminding us constantly of Twilight's continued existence is big enough of a crime in itself, so yeah, let's go with that. But all joking aside, if there's a version for light and a version for darkness, what's the deluxe version gonna be about? Then again, we have a few precedents. For example, let's take no further than Generation 4, we had Dialga for time, Palkia for space, but we had to add someone to complete the trio, and that turned out to be Giratina. And despite it not really be, it's sort of related to time and space, but at the same time, it's a bit too complicated to explain, but at the same time, it's my entire point. Giratina is hardly what you'd call devoid of character, even though it falls into a seemingly non-existent gap between time and space. But the games are going to come out this fall, so we should have an idea then. And just taking a break to mention that now, yes, I am aboard the abandoned ship, and I changed my lead to Skarmory because there is going to be a segment soon that's going to favor Blaziken, that being New Mobile, and we're still not done with the segment that favors Gardevoir, that is the sea. So that's why I'm raising Skarmory right now, because there's not going to be much room for it to level up until I actually start to make my way towards Fortree. So there are a few trainers in this abandoned ship, but pretty much the biggest deal about this ship is that once you obtained the dive HM and you gain the permission to dive, you can get into a few cabins that are at the end of the ship, and you open one cabin after the other. Like, you go into one cabin, grab the key to another cabin, go into that cabin, grab the key to another cabin, and so on and so forth, which is kind of like the same thing as the final boss battle from Metal Gear 2 on MSX for those who have played that. And yes, it's the one where Snake MacGyvers a flamethrower using a lighter and a spray can and uses it to incinerate Big Boss into ashes, and then in the next game, Liquid Snake wants Big Boss's remains even though there are no remains left to speak of. Oh, and Harbor Mail. Super. That's gonna make $25 more in my pockets, I guess. But yeah, as I was about to say, all that cabin opening thing is going to lead you to an item which you've got to give back to some guy who works here, and then he gives you the choice between a Deepseatooth and a Deepseascale. Now I always choose the Deepseascale because, well, not only is Gorebyss better in battle, but it also looks less lame. Huntail's like sort of a hairy eel. If you look at that brown stuff on it, it really does look like it's just a hairy eel. And while there's a bunch of people who say that the new Pokemon look retarded, a statement which I completely disagree with, Huntail would be one of the few exceptions. Huntail looks really freaking stupid. So yeah, that's why I always pick a Deepseascale, because anyway in Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum you can steal Deepseatooth and Deepseascales in infinite quantities, so that's sort of a moot point, but here I prefer Gorebyss always. Oh, the door is locked. Storage is painted on the door? Well, I can't say I remember that, or maybe it's that the thing you find in the cabins is the key to this storage room where you find the item to give back to well, it's not Captain Stern, but I think someone who works for him or something. And yeah, that room right there, that's where I have to dive to reach those cabins that are needed to reach, to obtain the Deepseatooth or the Deepseascale. Yay! It's a ship! Oh, come on. You know, Game Freak, while you're including all kinds of NPCs who say completely useless things, you might not include them at all. I mean, yay! It's a ship! No, I couldn't figure it out. The name of the place is Abandoned Ship. It flashed on the screen, and right now, every time I change screens, it flashes on the screen, so you'd think I know it's a ship by now? And I was talking about the Deepseatooth and the Deepseascale earlier on. For your information, because, well, honestly, I don't do Little Cup, but other people do. And in Little Cup, which is, if you remember, it's a sort of a metagame where only first stage Pokemon are used, and there are a few more rules, like it has its own Uber list, which includes Scyther, for example. Well, you know, the principle of an Uber item wasn't introduced with the Soul Dew in Overuse. It was actually the Deepseatooth in the Little Cup, because the Deepseatooth has been banned for quite a while now there, because it makes Clamperl into pretty much an unstoppable sweeper. And yes, I know it feels really odd to refer to Clamperl as an unstoppable force, but just to put matters in perspective, Clamperl with a Deepseatooth, it has, I believe, the highest special attack in the entire game. And that's including overused Pokemon and even Ubers. Even Fire Red Deoxys just falls short of what Clamperl can do with Deepseatooth. So imagine putting that monster in a metagame with only really weak Pokemon like Stage 1 ones. And, oh, well, yeah, thank you. Steel Wing misses and now I get a sand attack in the face. Well, I guess Swift is going to be pretty much needed, though Gardevoir is faster? Sorry. So that's not even a factor. That's what I wanted to say. But while I'm in the ship, it might be appropriate to bring up the fact that we are promised a new mode of transportation in Black and White, and many people speculate that it's going to be a car. But in which format? Is it going to be a car that you can actually drive around? I sort of doubt it, because the bike already fills that kind of function in terms of mobility. But I think that if for traveling from town to town, for example, I think maybe we could have sort of a system, like a taxi system, similar to that in Earthbound, which would essentially remove the need for a fly HM. So I'm sort of hoping, now this is just wild speculation, I'm just talking here, don't take anything for granted, but if that's something like that, I'm sort of hoping that it's part of an effort to get rid of HMs, because there isn't a single soul that I know of that actually likes the HM system the way it's now. It basically forces you to pack 1 or 2 or even more HM slaves wherever you go, and it's definitely not a very popular option because it reduces the number of actual team members that you can carry at once. So if it's something like that, well, all I gotta say is go right ahead. I know you're going to make a lot of people happy that way. It wasn't so bad in the first generation, back when there were only 5 HMs and 1 was only required in the rock tunnel, and after that you could just discard it. And I used a Krabby for my cut, surf, and strength needs. In my LP, if you remember, as for flying, it was covered by Articuno and Moltres. Oh! We got a storage key here, so that storage room isn't what leads to the Deepseatooth and the Deepseascale, who are given to you by this guy, by the way, and the item he's looking for is a scanner. For that, I'm sure you need to dive in that spot I showed you earlier in order to get the scanner, but for now, I'm just gonna check out what's inside this room, and okay. And it is TM13 Ice Beam! Wow, Wow, that's a good find. This is totally going to go on my Milotic once I get one. So now we're done with the abandoned ship for now. We're going to return here later though, and in the next video hopefully we're going to finish this sea segment and finally get to Slateport.